money back within the time that it falls due. If I delay in repaying, the market will signal to the market that I have defaulted, meaning I've not generated enough money from the economy to be able to repay back your loan. So because of this importance of trust and perception of trust of a government, many times when you hear a government has defaulted, it means that there are payments that fell during a particular time, and the government has communicated it will not be able to repay or pay off that amount within that time when it falls due. Yeah, so not necessarily that it has refused to pay, because in the real economic sense, no government can truly default. When a government decides to default, basically it means it's printing money to be able to pay back its loan. And printing money leads to inflation, which reduces the value of money.
Yeah, because people will wonder, the layman will ask, it's just money, so we just print more.
It has so many other implications.
So we just solve it,
Yeah, because all of this happens in books. So you're changing the balance in the books. And remember that printing money is not you go to the printer and then you print out the paper and you push it out into the economy. That's not how it works. It all works.
So no one can do it secretly? Kenya can't amua, we're printing and then nobody knows.
No, money only gets its value as money from the central bank, who is the only institution that gives money the ability to be used to exchange goods and therefore be called money. So if, before, a long time ago, when we used to have the barter trade, it was the trust between me and you of being able to exchange this newspaper for that newspaper, and being completely okay with that. That is what gave that transaction value. And it's the same thing with money. So money
because people ask these questions, it's just because when economists talk, they lose us in the mambo jumbo, the layman, and then we ask, but what are the solutions here from if you were at home and you needed something and you had the ability to make more of it, you just make more of it and solve it,
Yeah, but also it's not about making more of it. You want to control inflation, because the more money the government, for example, is putting out into the market beyond what it can generate, beyond its GDP, it leads to inflation, the loss of value of that money. And the whole concept of inflation is basically how much can you buy with, for example, 1,000 Kenya shilling. And when there's very high inflation, like for example in Germany in 1920 or in Zimbabwe in the late 1990s, inflation soars to the point that your 1,000 whatever unit local currency gets you less, and you can buy less and less with it. So for example, if there's a high inflation of maybe 1,000%, that has been seen with Zimbabwe, it means the 1,000 today can only buy maybe one unit worth of a good than it did before.
Yeah, because they made money up to it. They even made a trillion shillings.
Yes, because you can buy less and less with the same unit of money. And that's the whole issue with inflation, because then it completely eats away at your purchasing parity. It diminishes your living standards completely. It's not about the amount of paper, but what you can get for it.
What you can get for it.
Yeah, and so it's really important to manage inflation. And so many countries want to avoid defaulting because they don't want to print money. Yeah. And also the whole, sorry to cut you off, the whole issue of default is a little bit bigger than that. Just because a government says that they're not going to pay back an amount when it falls due, there are many other implications that come about from that. For example, the interest rate increases, meaning people want an additional compensation to lend money to the government. Sometimes the market for it, or the ability for the government to borrow from a particular market, for example, internationally diminishes. And then you have situations where people who held government debt try and sell it off, and they're willing to take off, to sell off at much lower rates than what they actually bought it for. So there's actual loss happening. So it's not as simple as we think. There are many implications of governments defaulting. So every government, I'm sure, tries to avoid that.
So this debt ceiling, which should really be the, I would imagine that would be Like if I went to a bank and I had a debt ceiling, and they said your debt ceiling is 100,000, it means I cannot borrow more than that money. But we have seen countries say, you know, we had a debt ceiling, but then they kind of pushed it. How does that work?
So the debt ceiling is basically...
Who sets it to begin with?
So usually a legal statute will usually set the debt ceiling, and then the legislatures in that market will help to, will sort of frame the rules at which how that debt ceiling can be amended or changed, or how that can be managed. In Kenya, we have the Kenya Public Finance Management Act, PFM Act, and it gives power to legislatures, the National Assembly, in section 12B1, to be able to control spending or control the amount the governments can borrow, and this can be done through setting an upper limit, and that upper limit through how much money a government can borrow in a given year, for example, or fiscal year.
But that's us. But does the lender reach a point and say, you know what, I'm not giving you more than this?
But who is the lender? The lender is, you know, the government can borrow domestically or it can borrow externally. So it depends on the appetite. The lender is, the lender could be anyone. The lender is banks, financial institutions. The lender is international financial markets, private investors, me and you. So if you are not willing to lend, somebody else might be willing to lend. And because of the role that government bonds play in financial markets, there's usually ready appetite for them. What usually happens if, for example, you increase the debt ceiling, or if you're not managing your finances well, is the market will know that they can, because there's higher demand and because you really need the money, that they will bid up the price at which they will lend to you as government. And because you are strained for cash, you're sort of constrained to borrow at higher rates or find another market that will be willing to tolerate your risk at that particular rate.
I hear you.
Yeah.
We'll take a break on that note. We'll be right back after these messages. Don't go away.